to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. You can help us make the next episode happen by joining us at digmeoutunion.com or dmounion.com. Jay, it's a round table, although right now it's a triangle because our round table is a little bit small at the moment. We might be getting some more people stopping by, but this round table, this discussion that we're having is about fake bands and artists. These are some of them we wish they would exist. Some of them we're glad they don't. But we're going to talk about bands that were in movies and television shows in the 90s that, were actually pretty good for the most part. Some of them weren't, but a lot of them were. This beat out the inverse, which was going to be actors who were in TV or musicians who were in TV shows and movies, or vice versa, actors who were in bands. That was going to be the other roundtable option, but people went with this one. The vote was not close. It was like 100% this topic. So we'll have to talk about Dog Star in a separate episode. Sorry, Keanu.
Oh, wow. I forgot about that.
Yes. Yeah. So joining us, he's back, Mr. Eric Peterson. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So let's get into it. The 90s were chock full of all sorts of bands and artists who didn't really exist other than for 2 hours on screen at our Cineplex or perhaps on a weekly television show. Some of them were brought to life via actual songwriters, which we'll get into, and then some of them were the creation of, say, professional songwriters, or some of them even dipped into the actual artists or the actual actors pulled them off. So we'll have a lot to cover with this. So let me ask you guys, when you think of fake bands or movie bands or TV show bands, what is like the first one from the 90s that pops into your head? Eric, I'll start with you.
Okay. Well, we're going to start off with a bang with the one I came here to really talk about. It's a band called Strange Fruit from a film called Still Crazy.
Yes.
Either of you seen this or heard this?
Yep.
All right. So the movie's what I would call a mid-range, mid-budget British film that's about the reformation of a 70s kind of hard rock, not quite metal. They were probably called metal in the 70s, but hard rock, psychedelic, poppy band. And it's about the members who are now in their 50s, approaching 60, getting together for a big reunion to play the newest iteration of a festival that they played back in the 70s. And it's actually a movie I like quite a bit. And I think what's great about it is that while some of the beats are kind of predictable, the performances are great. You have a mixture of actors and singers who act, who carry off the music. And some of the best music on here was written by, I believe the guys were in the band Squeeze or Crowded House, one of the two.
Okay.
So there's some really, really solid kind of pop rock, harder. It's not power pop, but it's more, it's rock and roll. It's harder, but it's still got a poppy edge. It's not AC/DC. It's maybe more, and this is not a disparagement because I actually like this band a lot. It's maybe a little bit more towards Roxette as far as that level of loud, energetic pop. And then there's a couple of really solid ballads on in the film, and it's one I really like and I really recommend. And I wish it would get a Blu-ray and more people would hear the music and see the movie.
I remember it. Jay, do you remember it?
Yeah, I've seen either the full movie or portions of it over the years.
I thought the music was like a slightly more rocking Alarm. Like you remember the Alarm, like Rain in the Summertime, and like it had that kind of vibe where it was like there's they're playing poppy music, but there can be some like edge to it. But I think they wanted it to be from the band, like they wanted it to fall into like from their look like the Who territory. Like the bass player looks a lot like John Entwistle at points in the movie. And but it's a really good cast. Like the band is really all really good actors.
Bill Nighy's really great in this. Stephen
Yeah.
Ray is solid. Even, Billy Connolly's pretty. It's a lot of fun providing kind of the comic relief, but also the narrator. But he does not have so much screen time that it becomes the Billy Connolly show. I think that's a good balance. And there's a little bit of a romance and a little bit of some teenage stuff going on, but I think overall it balanced it out really well. And if you're looking for a film that is just your feel good but entertaining with some heart and maybe something to say about aging and friendship, it's a solid watch.
I revisited the videos or songs, two of the songs from the show or from the movie on YouTube today, and I was like pleasantly surprised how well they stood up for being movie songs.
Yeah.
So, Jay, what's a band from this era or artist that first pops into mind?
The first one that came to mind for me was the Wonders from That Thing You Do, and probably similar to Eric in that the whole movie is about them. So, it's integral to the movie. You get a lot of material too. With some of these bands we'll talk about, you really only get one song or snippets here and there in the movie, but they play That Thing You Do in the movie several times all the way through. There's a live version, there's a studio version, you hear them recording it, but then you get other snippets, either partial songs or on the soundtrack, obviously you get the full song. So you get what feels like a very real band. And I think they also nail the, sometimes it's in these movies, they have a difficult time like nailing like what kind of band is this, and like having them sound really authentic and believable and look believable for the whatever era the movie set in and whatever genre they're supposed to be. And this is one where like they nail it. All the guys in the band look like they would be in a band at that time. The style of the music, the songwriting, like they kind of hit that Dave Clark 5 kind of feel for a lot of the material. And even the bands they kind of put around them, they have some other, when they go on tour, you hear some other songs and material, and even all that stuff is just so like mid early 60s pop, like nailed. It's totally authentic and believable. It's just all so well done, and the songs are pretty great. I mean, That Thing You Do is a legitimate hit song. Like, when it was written for a movie, but like everything about it, you're like, it's catchy as hell. The performance is fantastic. You totally believe it. So yeah, that's the one that really pops to my head first.
That's also on my list, and I couldn't find my copy of the soundtrack. But the two things I would add are it's referenced in the Nuggets box set liner notes as being something that kind of brought more attention to that late 60s pop garage rock era. And the second thing is that it's not a one-to-one example, but in a lot of ways it could almost be the prequel to Still Crazy, because the Wonders could be the Still Crazy guys if you made a film about what they were doing in the 1990s.
Oh yeah.
And actually that would be interesting for Tom Hanks to maybe revisit that film all these years later with the story of where those guys were 30 years later.
Right.
25 years later or whatever.
That'd be fun.
And actually all the music for that movie is really good. Like when they go out on that tour with and it's the group, and they have like the female soul singers that are sort of in the vein of like Martha and the Vandellas. Like they're really good. And then they have like the like Nancy Sinatra style singer. Like all that stuff is like really well done. I don't know, Adam Schlesinger wrote I believe the theme song, that thing you do. But I don't know if he was involved with the writing of all those songs or if that was other people. But all the music sounds like totally period correct.
Yeah.
From what I read, Tom Hanks even had a hand in writing some of the songs, at least some of the lyrics and whatnot. So, but yeah, I mean, Adam, I think obviously wrote That Thing You Do and had to put a huge stamp on it. But yeah, they nail it. Like, you totally believe all those bands. Like, it just feels real.
So related to that, do you guys remember the Greg Kihn band from the 80s?
Oh yeah.
So Greg Kihn wrote a couple of novels in the 90s that are horror novels. And the first one's about a low budget movie production and there's a band involved. And the second one is about a band that is like the Wonders that go through the same thing. And then the third one is about that band becoming, or one of the members becoming like a neo blues guys in the 70s. So that feels like that same time period. I'm assuming Greg Kihn's probably in the same age group as Tom Hanks, so that you have these two different types of writers and creators coming at that very similar material from two different points of view. One's doing it from the kind of almost fun teen picture feeling of like almost not quite a beach movie, but something close to that for That Thing You Do. Whereas these books are more like the horror version of that. So maybe it's one of those things where you have people of the same age that have the same influences that are putting out their same version of the story that's been germinating, in their subconscious and probably been talking to people about for years.
Yeah.
Well, one of the movies and bands that I always associate with the 90s is The Commitments. And it has a very like special place in my heart. When I was at Bowling Green, for my last full year on campus, I was an RA. I was a resident advisor, and the guy who ran our dorm and was in charge of all the RAs, he liked to do movie nights. Like, he was a huge movie nerd, and he loved to do movie nights with the staff. So like once a month we would get together and have a movie night, because we didn't know this is one of the amazing things. We didn't know that there was actually a massive suite where the person who ran the dorm lived in. Like, it was like this, like the size of like an apartment, and we were living in these like, tiny little boxes in this dorm. And so we walked in there, we're like, oh my gosh, this is like an actual apartment in here. So anyway, I had not seen The Commitments, and this was like 1998, and The Commitments came out in 1991. And it was just a lot of fun. Like, I remember watching this and going, is that Glenn Hansard? And it turns out like it is. It's Glenn Hansard plays one of the roles because he was an up and coming musician, and they wanted to get actual musicians to play a lot of the roles, as opposed to people who were an actor but could maybe learn an instrument or look like they knew what they were doing. They actually got musicians and hired people based on, well, can you kind of act? Okay, that's good enough. So besides Glenn Hansard, who was just a busking musician in Ireland, like, I don't even think the Frames were a thing yet. Andrea Corr, who is a member of the Corrs, which is an Irish band that's been around for a long time, she's in the band. They were just starting when she joined it, and several other folks who have had careers who were just starting out, but went on to work in like stage, like musicals and stuff like that. We're all a part of this group, and I just remember like feeling like this is as close to, with regards to the musicianship and everything. When I look back at it now, like, it's as close to getting it right, where the practices and the crappiness of gigs sometimes and all that kind of stuff, it really like is a lot of fun in comparison to what it's really like. Whereas sometimes you watch, especially for people who have been in bands, you watch movies or TV shows about bands, you're like, that's not what it's like at all. Like, this is not realistic, especially for a band on a local level. Like, you don't get people standing in front of the stage at your first gig. That just doesn't happen. You got to, unless you have some sort of hook that are bringing people in. And they were, their hook, of course, in The Commitments was that they were a bunch of Irish people doing amazing American soul music, and with this great lead singer who was a bit of a who's difficult to put it mildly. So that's the one. I mean, the two that you guys mentioned are always at the top of my mind, because I'm one of those people with Still Crazy. I'm like, oh, if you haven't seen it, you got to. It's a good flick, and everybody knows that thing you do. So, but The Commitments has always been one that I like to go back and revisit every once in a while. Have either of you guys seen it?
I saw it when it came out. I haven't really seen it since. I remember the soundtrack being huge. I remember there was actually a second volume of the soundtrack that was released because of how big it was. It's a film that's frankly something I need to revisit. It's a film I remember liking, but just for whatever reason did not leave a big impact on me.
Would you say that movie's worth a revisit, Tim?
Yeah, I just think it captures a really interesting. I think also because it's not a U.S. movie. It's everything is all in Ireland, and it's all the actors are Irish. I think it has an interesting perspective on American soul music, which they're reinterpreting, and it's really well done. And I what was interesting is that they played a lot of songs, like Dark End of the Street, or
Mustang Sally.
Mustang Sally, that I kind of knew, but I knew them through other artists covering them. Like I knew Dark End of the Street because the Afghan Wigs had covered it as a B-side, and I had never heard like the original version. And then I heard them do it, and I was like, oh, I know this song. And then I went back and actually found the original like James Carr version from the 1950s or whatever it was. And this and a few other bands really made me sort of dive into stuff that I wasn't as familiar with, in terms of like Otis Redding and Sam Cooke and Al Green and those kind of artists that I had not really listened to that much, because that wasn't really around when I was growing up. It just wasn't in, my parents didn't own records, and I was listening to pop radio. So I didn't have any, other than like classic rock radio, there you had to turn on like AM radio to listen to those artists. Those weren't on. FM was all like, Led Zeppelin and that kind of stuff. So this was actually, it was a good introduction to a lot of artists that I would end up really liking much later. As far as TV shows, so we mentioned 3 movies. Are there any TV shows with either music that popped up, in terms of like a special appearance by a fake band, or that incorporated a band into the storyline of the TV show that you guys remember or particularly enjoyed?
I don't think we need to talk too long about this, but of course, My So-Called Life had Animal Bag and first episode. And then, of course, the Jordan Catalano character was playing music.
Yes.
And
his sad grunge band.
Yeah. Although, let me go off script here and throw out Daria with Mystic Spiral.
That's right.
I think Daria might be the most 90s television series out there, and I love it for it. But yes, and they also had a boatload of great songs on the soundtrack, and I think that's what kept it off of physical media for a while. But Daria's friend Jane's brother Trent and his band Mystic Spiral, it's great because they're always kind of just on the edge of actually playing or actually having a song.
Just so we are completists, the band from My So-Called Life was Frozen Embryos.
Okay.
That's what they didn't have a name until Rayanne, I believe, joined the band, and then she I think she flipped out when when they actually tried to play the show with her, and she lost it and ran off stage.
True story. A band that a lot of you probably know of. They did the theme song for the show Rescue Me. Their lead singer famously was beaten in the street by Jack White. Their original band was called the Baby Killers, and it was kind of a swampy Cramps style band. And their original lead singer, she lasted one show before freaking out and running away.
Interesting. Now you had mentioned Friends, and we all know Smelly Cat from
Yeah.
Friends. There actually is an episode where Ross and Chandler have a new wave band. It's like in flashback, I think.
Yes, I think I vaguely recall that now that you mention it.
It's called Way No Way. Like was not was. Way No Way. And the song was called She Feels Weird Since I've Been Gone. And the plot line involved Ellen Pompeo, who would later end up on Grey's Anatomy for like 50 years. Speaking of frozen embryos, there are a lot of terrible band names.
Yeah.
From these fake. And I actually read an article about why that is. So somebody who was involved in production for TV shows and movies said when they it was on AV Club, and they said when they are putting together, when they have to put together a band or an artist for a fictional TV show, they have to do a search to make sure that these names have never existed. So oftentimes, like when you get like Way No Way, which is obviously a play on Was Not Was.
Yeah.
They will do that. They will take like a real band's name and then try to like play off of it in a ridiculous way that no other band would have actually ever used the name. And so that's how you end up with bands like from Reality Bites. Hey, that's my bike.
So you say Way No Way, and my first thought is Way, as in Wayne's World.
Right.
Yes.
Speaking of bands on TV.
And then if you remember Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Seth Green had a band on that show, and it was called Dingoes Ate My Baby. So here's a question for you. In the movie Can't Hardly Wait, there's a band. Does the band ever play?
No idea. I like that movie. I've watched it probably 4 or 5 times in my life. I have no memory of the band.
It was Breckenmeyer on lead vocal, dressed like a count. It was Donald Faison, who was on Scrubs. He's on drums. And then it was 2 other guys that I don't know who they are, but they were on like bass and guitar. And the band's called Love Burger with an umlaut over the U. And if you remember, they get into a fight because the guitar player wants to wear the shirt on stage at the house party, and they're like, "You can't wear the shirt of your own band." And I think what happens is they start to play and they like count in 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's when the cops break down the door at the end of the movie when the party gets broken up. So that is like the great unknown. Like, what did Love Burger sound like? They could have been amazing, but we don't know.
Have either of you seen the show called The Middleman? This is probably from the last 10 years.
No, but I've heard of it.
There's a character named Noser who plays in a band, and it's obvious that they couldn't afford any music rights. So the way they get around that is the characters will say, "Do you know this song?" And he'll be like, "Yeah, I know that." And that's kind of how they indicate that his band played at the party or whatever. So it's actually a really fun show. I think it was on ABC Family. You can find it on DVD. It's maybe perfect for introducing a tween to kind of horror, sci-fi, monster kinds of things because it's funny and light. So at any rate, that's the idea of the band never playing. I think, do you know that song? Yeah, I know it.
We did get some comments over at Patreon. I want to bring them up. Scott Hallgrim said, "This would have made a great April Fool's episode." I don't know why.
We just
he said-
actually like seriously review one of the
yeah. Well, we
bands.
might get there.
Yeah.
I really like the production on
Exactly.
Natalie's freezing news, single.
He said, I'm not sure about the best band, but the best song is clearly Touch Me, I'm Dick by Citizen Dick. He also said, my friends and I used to host viewing parties of The Heights and mock it the entire hour, mostly hair puns since the band cared more about their hair than their songs or really anything else.
Well,
And
let's keep in mind here that The Heights had a #1 song.
it did.
So there was some attention paid to it, if you consider pop songwriting and charting as any sign of that. But yeah, the song from that show went to #1, which I totally forgot about.
So the main research I did for this episode is watching an episode of The Heights. And I can confirm that the hair was glorious and
Was it good?
Crucial.
very important. Yes.
Is that the
It was
last time that's happened with regard, or did any Hannah Montana chart? Because she was a band, right?
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I guess you know what?
I
I guess Glee probably had some
Yeah.
hit singles
But
because I
those
know
are
they put out
kind of-
albums.
That's kind of a gray area though, because Glee was, obviously it's all about
Right, those are
the
covers.
Glee Club, and it's all covers. Yeah. Which was great. A lot of songs got some exposure, but not like an out of nowhere song that is that's in the show as opposed to maybe the theme song. The Friends theme song was a big hit, and other shows have had big hits with their theme songs.
Right. Now Darren Leach had some comments. He mentioned Citizen Dick from Singles. He mentioned Wild Stallions from Bill and Ted, which of course we got to mention Wild Stallions. Have either of you seen the new movie?
I have not, but I would like to. What I've heard is it's fun and it's kind of what you want and from a Bill and Ted film, and that everyone had the memo about the kind of film they were making.
Well, that's good. I like everybody to be on the same page. I'm glad John Wick didn't show up.
No one's doing Shakespeare.
Some mention of bands from 2000 did get thrown in. We're going to be okay since these artists also have hits in the 90s. That, of course, would be Sonic, Death Monkey, Kathleen Turner, Overdrive, Barry Jive, and the Uptown Five from High Fidelity. The book was written in 1995, and the movie came out in 2000. So, of course, that is the unimpeachable Mr. Jack Black from High Fidelity, which honestly, his version of Let's Get It On at the end of that movie is pretty fantastic.
It is. And let me also mention that there really was a alternative band in the 90s called Kathleen Turner Overdrive. I actually have their disc. They were an Atlanta band that featured one of the members of Drivin' and Cryin'. And for those of you who are in election mode, there's a song called Red, White, and Screwed that you might want to check out.
Nice.
I believe that it's up on Spotify at this point.
What was the name of the fictional band from that movie that the two skater kids that they make a big deal about the demo tape that you hear for you hear it at the record release party. You can hear it played over the PA a little bit.
Something with a wheelchair.
Yes, that was the song, maybe.
Because I remember the album cover has like something grandma. I stole grandma's wheelchair or something like that, or it's probably not right. You gotta Google that.
I'm looking.
I'll mention some of the other Darren Leach picks here. The Simpsons had an episode that revisited Marge and Homer in the 90s as if they were going through grunge. And there was a band called Sadgasm. And the two songs were, there was a song called Margarine, which was actually a take on Bush's Glycerine. And then another one called Shave Me, which was a take on Nirvana's Rape Me. So there's that.
Simpsons are so good. The band was called the Kinky Wizards.
Yes,
Kinky Wizards.
should have remembered that.
What was the name of the song? Do you remember? You know,
Oh, geez, Tim.
I thought there was like something in. Okay,
There
maybe
was
it's just-
something about mom's wheelchair.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Darren Leach also mentioned the Wonders, Citizen Dick, and the Weird
believe that's-
Sisters.
I believe that's the Oneaters.
No, the Oneaters, exactly.
I sold my mom's wheelchair.
There it
you go.
is. That's it. The Weird Sisters is from Harry Potter, and it was a supergroup comprised of Jarvis Cocker and Steve Mackey from Pulp, along with Johnny Greenwood and Phil Selway of Radiohead. And for some reason, in the book, they're not called the Weird Sisters. They're called something else, because I know this because my daughter has read them. But they changed the name for the movie. And then Richard Waterman also brought up a 2000s band, which is Stillwater from Almost Famous, which in terms of musical like accuracy, those songs by Stillwater are really good. Like Fever Dog, and then the one that sounds like Bad Company, where they play with the piano. Like those are really good songs. I know Ann Wilson had a hand in. Was it Ann or Nancy?
Ann Wilson and
Nancy
Peter
Wilson.
Frampton.
Nancy Wilson, I believe, is the one that was married to Cameron and Crowe.
You're right, Nancy. And then Peter Frampton wrote, I guess, the music. And Cameron Crowe apparently had a role writing some of the lyrics too.
Gotcha. And there's a 6-song EP.
They nailed. Oh, really?
Yeah, it's available with the deluxe version of the DVD. 6 full songs.
I want to get that.
I know. Me too. I didn't know that until I read Richard's comment.
But what's so brilliant about that is like they are like they say it in the movie, like they are a middle tier rock and roll band, and they sound like a middle tier rock and roll band. Like I think I'm with you. Like I think the songs are like really good, but they don't sound like Led Zeppelin. You know what I mean?
No.
Yeah, this sounds like a really solid like Bad Company, type band.
Exactly.
But the middle tier, like they totally nail it.
Once again, it could almost be a prequel to Still Crazy.
Yep. Yeah, it's in that same time frame, like in terms of when that all occurs. Are there any bands that we haven't mentioned so far that you think are worth mentioning? Unfortunately, I do have to mention that when I was going down my rabbit hole of watching stuff, I revisited Coming to America with Randy Watson and Sexual Chocolate, and that is simply one of the greatest, like 2 minutes of music on film.
Yeah,
his take on the greatest love of all is just mind-bendingly great.
So I've got one that let's see what you guys think about this. Let's see if you've ever heard of this. This is the soundtrack to Ed's Next Move.
No idea what that is.
Band called Ed's Redeeming Qualities. So if you look at the cover there, those are the stars of the film. Kelly Thorne, who's probably most famous for Homicide: Life on the Streets. She had a show called Necessary Roughness a couple of years ago. And Matt, I forget his last name, but he was in Matt Ross. He's probably most famous for being in Silicon Valley at this point.
Oh, okay.
He is a guy from Wisconsin that is a geneticist who gets a job in New York. He moves to New York and he meets this woman, Kelly Thorne, who plays violin and sings in a band called Ed's Redeeming Qualities. Now, Ed's Redeeming Qualities is actually a functioning band. They were on Rounder Records, so they're kind of that alternative folk, alternative country sound. And there are a couple performances in the movie, and there are a couple times when she goes to practice or whatnot. It's a very charming little indie film. If you're like me and you like 90s indie rom-coms where the men aren't complete idiots, it's worth tracking down. The music's actually pretty great. There's some other bands on the soundtrack that some are good, some are not so great, but the Ed's Redeeming Qualities songs on here are kind of a little bit snarky, a little bit fun, a little bit sarcastic, but still kind of gentle. Definitely think it's something that if you like that kind of coffee house, sarcastic 90s sound that you might really dig.
I think we have to talk about a band and a movie that most of our listeners, I assume, have seen because it was on basic cable nearly every day, and that's Airheads.
Yes.
And the unfortunately named the Lone Rangers, which was the band.
You don't want to talk about the Sons of Thunder?
What was that?
We already talked about them. That's the Galactic Cowboys. That was their
Oh,
90s film
Yeah.
appearance.
You're
They were
right.
like the big crazy metal band that rightfully the Lone Rangers were competing with, or were disdainful of, I should say.
And the thing that always bothered me about that was, I guess that movie came out in 94.
Mm-hmm.
And it always felt like the band and the music in it was not right. Like it wasn't grungy enough, and it wasn't like mid 90s enough. It was too 80s.
Because it's not. It's a cover of the 80s hardcore punk band Reagan Youth.
Oh wow, okay.
Degeneration, one of their songs.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. The originals. So when I say hardcore, I don't mean like necessarily like Black Flag or something really loud, fast, and inaccessible. I mean more of that kind of fast, snotty, like mid 80s hardcore sound. And for the film, they kind of glammed it up a little bit, which isn't the worst way to make it a little more accessible. But you're right, it should have been more like My Sister's Machine, or trying to think of other bands that I don't have in the hopper for someday picking that were like third tier bands.
Right.
You know, it maybe should have been a little, like a little more. My Sister's Machine is the one that are you familiar with? My Sister's Machine, kind of a sub Alice in Chains or Alice in Chains adjacent band. Yep. That's what I think the Lone Rangers should have sounded like.
And that was the kind of the look I think they were going for for the band. Like they kind of are in that like early Alice in Chains kind of look. But it just never was believable to me. You know, I know it's a comedy, but you're like, still, even with the,
I will say this,
it's kind of a great song. You believe the band is real.
You're right, but that is a great song. I think I will defend that song as being solid.
You guys ready to get real into the minutia right now? Because I got some great ones. These are ones you'll be like, oh yeah, but they're so obscure. Probably. Okay.
Can I talk about two really quickly?
Do it.
So one of the biggest soundtracks of the decade, people totally forget that the main character was also a musician, The Crow.
Oh.
He was supposed to be, the song It Can't Rain All the Time was supposed to be the song, I believe, that the Crow character, Eric Draven, that was his band's single. So there's The Crow.
Oh.
And then I have not seen this in forever, and I actually have the soundtrack, but film Suburbia, not Suburbia, the Penelope Spheres punk film, but the 90s one. The character that is coming back to town is a musician, and there's a lot of talk about how he did some flute music at graduation, and everyone can't believe that he's a big music star now. So there's that. Okay. Hit me with it.
Fuck you, Yankee Blue Jeans.
Okay.
I'm gonna sing this song and you're gonna know what it is. My love for you is like a truck berserker. Would
Clerks.
you like? Yes. That's the name of the band, and they're actually wearing the T-shirt in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and it says "Fuck you, Yankee Blue Jeans." But that it's
now that you mention it, go ahead.
It's a friend of it's Silent Bob's cousin Olaf, who's from Russia, and he fronts a metal band, and that's the band, and that's his song. It's Berserker.
That's awesome.
So that's a great one. Also, do you guys remember the Flintstones movie with John Goodman?
Yeah.
Okay. The B-52s appear. The B-52s appear as the BC-52s, and they play a song called "The Bedrock Twitch," which is actually played on the radio in the car like earlier in the movie. But they're in the movie at a gig. Told you I was gonna get some obscure ones in here. Those are like some classic ones where you're like, oh yeah.
So one I had in that vein was that I'm a huge fan of Big Lebowski, but I forgot that
Autobahn.
plays such a huge role in the movie. Like,
Nice.
That's right.
how did this not come to me sooner?
Yeah, I'm feeling stupid for missing that one. That's one of my top 10 films. So
another one from the 90s that we can't forget is Zack Attack. Do we remember Zack Attack?
are they like the Zit solution or whatever it was from Degrassi?
They were on Saved by the Bell. It was Zach,
Yes.
Screech, Slater, Lisa, and Kelly, and their song was called "Did We Ever Have a Chance?" And it shows them like playing in clubs. Like there's a video, you can watch the whole video on YouTube, and then they're like in the studio recording. Like there's a whole montage of them doing their thing, and it's the song is horrific. I mean, it is just like one of the worst things. What I found, I didn't really think about it, but I mentioned Sadgasm from The Simpsons. There are a ton of fake artists from The Simpsons with like little snippets of music. I mean, they might just sing like one line from like a bad song that is only exists for that 10 seconds. But there's a website called fakebands.com. It's the Rocklopedia Fake Bandica. And you can go there by year and look things up. And almost every every other entry is a fake band from The Simpsons. It's hilarious how many fake bands existed just from on The Simpsons.
So can we talk about a movie that maybe has one of the most famous fake artists of the 90s? A movie that is beloved by many, hated by many, where the fake artist actually has his own annual day. Do you know where I'm going with this?
I know where you're going with this.
This is where you can drop in the clip, right? Of
yes.
Rex Manning from Empire Records.
Yep.
Whatever else you can say about this movie, I like to rewatch it sometimes just for the fashion and the slang and to see what 1994 or whatever it was looked like to a certain degree. I like that it's not a super glossy, LA, everyone's got the latest fashions and haircuts and cars. Everything looks a little bit more lived in, a little more like middle America, or second or third city America. And that people talk about music in this film, and they talk about a lot of different kinds of music. And at its best moments, it's a celebration of people connecting around music. So.
Yeah, and you want to know what's funny is that when I saw that movie when it came out, and when I saw it, I didn't know that Gwar were a real band.
They seem like a fake band.
They seemed like a fake band when I saw the movie. I was like, oh, this is terrifying. And yeah, so I didn't know that. But yes, Rex Manning Day is celebrated. What year? What is it in, like May or something? I forgot when.
Something.
When Rex Manning Day
Facebook
is
will tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone will remind you.
You'll get the reminder.
April 8th.
Oh, April. I was a month ahead. Let's see. Were there other mentions in the comment? I think we got to all the comments mentions.
So we talked briefly about the Heights. In looking into the Heights, there was a Canadian show called Catwalk. Did you guys stumble across this at all?
No.
That was about a band, and the setting was kind of slightly futuristic and slightly dark cyberpunky. Probably the most famous person to be in it was Nev Campbell, but apparently the music was from the same people that wrote the music for the Heights.
Oh, so they were like just going around the world making
and this show lasted
TV music.
This show lasted 2 seasons.
Okay. There was some other ones. Let me find my. Let me get back to my list here. While
you're looking, I'll throw another one out there.
Yeah, please do.
Is it the Hot Rats or the Wild Rats from the Velvet Goldmine film?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's what I wanted to. Yes, there's a ton of great music. I mean, some of it is covers, but
yeah.
And the Venus and Furs.
Yes. Who all are in like playing the real? Is
I
it
believe
Placebo?
No, it's some of it. At least the Wild Rats, which is supposed to be Iggy and the Stooges, is actually Ron Ashton from the Stooges, Jay Mascis from Dinosaur Jr. I want to say somebody from Sonic Youth, and maybe Mike Watt from the Minutemen. There was that group of people that the Boston's like 90s alternative scene, plus member of the Stooges, plus whoever else that was in that. Let's see, do I have it here?
And I think Venus and Furs was like Shudder to Think, and then different singers, like Ewan McGregor sings one of the songs. And
yeah.
Well, I thought that isn't there
Tom
a scene
York
when they're in a
sings.
bar and there's a band playing 20th Century Boy, and I think it's Placebo that's playing.
That's Placebo. Yeah.
But they're just okay.
I don't know if they, I mean, on the soundtrack is listed as Placebo and it's a 20th Century Boy. I don't remember in the movie if they had a different name.
Yeah, good point. There were a lot of sketch shows too, like Mr. Show and Kids in the Hall all had fake bands for various episodes or fake artists.
Herman Menderchuk's Armada featuring Fran Torkelson from Kids in the Hall.
There you go. And there's a band in the Brain Candy movie as well.
Yes.
Which I think this isn't like Cancer Boy. Is that the name of the song?
Yes. I've seen that film once, and I probably need to see it again because I think it all went right over my head.
Yeah, that movie. I remember it because Tragically Hip is featured. Has some songs in it, and I didn't know what the hell was going on because I didn't really watch Kids in the Hall that much. I caught like a couple episodes.
So good. Maybe I mentioned Daria. As far as nailing the Gen X experience, Kids in the Hall, I think, did it best.
There's one we need to address because I don't know if there's any other category we'll ever be able to cover it. And that is Chris Gaines.
Oh.
The alter ego of Garth Brooks that was supposed to be in a movie called The Lamb, but got canceled because of the failure of the Chris Gaines Greatest Hits album that came out in 1999.
I think they got it backwards. Like, don't you do the movie first, and then if the movie's successful, then you invest in actually like creating the album for the artist?
You do the movie, and then the album is the soundtrack.
Yeah,
like Crazy Heart.
Yeah, unfortunately, Garth thought that
he had you fooled.
He did have me fooled. I didn't know what was going on. He wanted to establish Chris Gaines as a legitimate artist with a soul patch and his hair combed forward.
I think he probably went about it the wrong way. He should have put out a 7-inch on like a little label.
It came right out with the greatest hits.
Send it to Maximum Rock and Roll, have them shit on it. the whole, you got to build these things.
Yeah.
And then there's also there was a pretty mediocre movie that came out in 1999 called The Suburbans. Either of you, this has Will Ferrell. That's the only major actor that's in it besides Jennifer Love Hewitt's in it.
I was going to say, yep.
And they're basically a bunch of guys who were in a band who are past their prime. They had a one-hit wonder in the 80s, and this record company person who's played by Jennifer Love Hewitt wants to get them back together. They had a single called By My Side that was like a hit. And It's not a watchable movie. I mean, it's a pretty bad movie, but it did have a single, or it did have a music. It did have actual music, and people like, because it takes place in the 80s. Then you have like a flock of seagulls show up at one point, like, and Dick Clark's in it, making a rare appearance. I'm kidding, because he was in a lot of stuff as himself. He was always himself. Any others that you guys would like
Sure.
to mention? Oh, go ahead, because this movie got brought up, but we missed the music in it. Go ahead.
Have you seen or heard Hardcore Logo?
No.
1996 Canadian film by Bruce McDonald. It's about the former members of a punk band called Hardcore Logo, and I believe it's their final tour. It's actually a pretty great looking movie. That one is kind of interesting. Once again, it's one that I saw at the time and really enjoyed, but I have not revisited it in several years. There's also, excuse me, a film called Girl from the late 90s with Dominique Swain. And she is a high school girl that's about to graduate and is looking to lose her virginity and get sucked into, I believe it's the Portland music scene of the era, and starts dating a musician. It's another one, it's on Amazon Prime, but there's no physical media release besides the old VHS. So that is out there as well.
Okay, this is the one I almost forgot. Crucial Taunt.
Yes, from Wayne's World.
From Wayne's World.
Featuring Mark Ferrari on guitar.
Yes. Tia Carrera making
and
her...
and Anthony Fox on drums, doing the very spot-on show drummer style with the high sticks and the...
That was another film like The Commitments that introduced a lot of people to music that might have heard, off and on over the years, but Ballroom Blitz has now become like the go-to cover for so many, or Needle Drop to signify early 70s glam kind of thing. And also Dreamweaver, I believe, is on that soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when they're playing in some club and like Rob Lowe is there to scout them, Mike Myers is watching the band, and then Tia Carrera like locks eyes with him, and then Dreamweaver starts playing. It's very emotional.
They do 2 or 3 songs. I think there's a couple songs on the soundtrack, and then I think there's maybe 3 in the movie.
Yeah, when they're playing that, I mean, maybe it's an older cover, but I feel like it's great for the
Tia
movie.
Carrera is singing all of it too.
Possibly.
So, yeah. It might actually be those guys in the movie also perform the music. Possibly. Which isn't always the case with most of these we've gone through. We haven't really covered that. If any of them are actually the people you see.
Any others?
Is this a real band? You tell me. This film's called Detroit Rock City, and they're going to see some band called Kiss.
Now there is a fake band in that. The guys that are in high school are in a band called Mystery.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know if they actually show them playing or not, or if they just allude to the fact that they're in that band. I don't remember, but I remember that from doing reading, because I was like, is there a fake band in that movie? And I looked, and it mentions that the kids are in a band called Mystery, but I don't remember if they actually play.
I wanted to like that movie way more than I did.
Yeah, it was not. It was not memorable or all that great.
There was also a TV show created by the folks who did Saved by the Bell called California Dreams. Do you guys remember this?
Mm-mm.
I've seen the name.
It was about a pop rock band in a California high school. And they had a song called Jake's Song because a guy joined the band named Jake. And then they did they did a couple other originals, but it was on for like a couple years. It was on from 1992 to 1996. That's actually 4 years.
Yeah.
But I don't recognize like any of the actors. They're all like teenage actors. Well, supposed to be teenagers. They might have been, in their 20s, like 90210. So, yeah, that's the list for me. I'm tapped out.
Well done.
You got any, Jay?
No, I think we got everything on my list too.
Okay. So there is a 1996 film called Bandwagon. It's about a guy named Tony who gets fired from his job, but he doesn't really care because he wants to play in a band called Circus Monkey. You can find this on YouTube. I watched it once. I recall it being okay, but it's something I've been pointed to at least once regarding films with music or films around bands. There's also, I believe, in the film Glory Days. Anybody seen Glory Days with Ben Affleck, Sam Rockwell? It's the last year of college at a state school for.
Is that with a Z?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So the characters, they all live in this house together and they have a band. And they're going to play they're all about to graduate, but they don't really want to move on. So they decide they're going to stay, and they throw a big party and their band plays. And then they decide one by one, forget it. We're just going to get on with our lives. It's an interesting film. The band is just kind of there. It seems like any band or any film about college kids that live in a house together eventually is going to have at least somebody in that group that's in a band.
How did I not see this? Matthew McConaughey's in it.
Matt Damon is in it.
Matt Damon, Brendan Fraser.
Brendan Fraser has one scene with Leah Remini that's hysterical. It's got a great punk rock soundtrack. If you've ever seen Noah Baumbach's Kicking and Screaming, which is a film I really like, this is like this. If Kicking and Screaming is the Ivy League version of Gen X not wanting to leave college, Glory Days is the state school version of that.
Jim Copany sent me an email, and he mentioned Josie and the Pussycats from 2001.
Yeah.
And Streets of Fire from 1984.
Ellen Aim and the Attack. If we want to talk about 80s films, we can definitely talk about. Have you seen Streets of Fire?
No, I should have, because it's got a good cast and a director.
It's Walter Hill doing a Western in a slightly more neon lit looking like setting that would be out of The Warriors. And it's basically Michael Pare as John Wayne off to save the woman from the biker gang. The Blasters are actually perform in it. And the big hit was I Can Dream About You by Dan Hardman.
I love that song.
There's two great like total Jim Steinman who wrote them, like rocker ballads in it as well, that are a band from Boston called Face to Face. Highly recommended. Love that film. There's a great Blu-ray. The soundtrack's great too. But that is definitely, I mean, then if you want to get into the 80s, we can talk about like.
We're not going to go down that road.
Or Nile Dresden or whatever. So.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. We'll do that in an 80s episode.
Yeah.
I just want to, because Jim contributed those, so I want to throw him in.
That's fine.
There was a little, I felt like there was a little, we've touched on them, I think, but a bit of a surge in early 2000s, right? Because you get High Fidelity, you get Almost Famous, you get Josie and the Pussycats.
Mm-hmm.
Weren't there some other ones? Like there was a little window of time there. Yeah, you get
with Rockstar.
Yep, you get Rockstar. There's like a 2 or 3 year window where there was a lot of movies featuring bands.
Yep. Yeah, that definitely happened. I don't know what they were just trying to cash in on all the, those screenplays were probably written in the 90s and then they got made in the 2000s. So that makes sense.
If either of you seen a film called Garage Days? that's Alex Proyas's film After Dark City. I think it's from 2000. It's about a garage band in Australia and their struggle to make it. And it's worth watching, so I won't reveal the punchline, but it's definitely was probably written at the end. It was the thing he did right after Dark City. And it's a lot of fun, or I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a 2002. So it's
okay,
right.
Yeah. So it was probably made right there at the end of the 90s and into the early 2000s thought process. Yep. But that's definitely an interesting film.
I'll have to check that out.
I guess it also does kind of coincide when rock pretty much started to disappear from the pop charts too.
Yeah.
Like that last little burst of like, no, we're still here. There's some, I think Detroit City came around that time. Like there was a little burst there.
This is where MTV is moving away from actually showing music and videos and you know, the media consolidation across the board and radio formats changing. And
yep.
Related to this, our local alternative station finally switched formats after almost 30 years this earlier this week. But I think a lot of in the early 90s, there were a lot of stations that wanted to become alternative or modern rock and did not last more than a couple of years in that format. So,
hey, speaking of that, CD 101, which was CD 102.5, and then they went off the air, they're back. 92.9. They found a new signal. They just keep bouncing off the airways.
Okay.
Well,
how did they go off?
They like lost the lease on their signal. You know, they got like bought out. Because they didn't own their signal. Somebody else owned it and they were renting it, and then that person sold it off to somebody else. So they've been off the air for like a month.
Oh.
So completely off topic from this episode.
But you're right about the that's when stuff becomes, and I recall Kurt Loder mentioning the year of was it something to the effect of, now we're in the hyper poppy times when, you know, Spice Girls and NSYNC and Backstreet Boys started to infiltrate the charts.
Right. And they would have movies documenting.
Which kind of makes Josie and the Pussycats a very like, looking back, and I recently rewatched it, I was like, wow, this movie is like kind of important.
It is.
Like I didn't know it at the time, but like looking back, I was like, oh my God, it just captured that moment you're talking about, Eric, of like this conflict between pop and like authenticity. And like
I recently watched it as well, and that's a film that's grown a cult following. One of my favorite recent podcast episodes or moments was on the Movies That Made Me podcast. Director Joe Dante being recommended Josie and the Pussycats by the guy that wrote A History of Violence, and him saying, "Oh, it's so great, you got to watch it." But you mentioned the Spice Girls. That Spice Girls movie is actually quite entertaining as well, and it's kind of also a zany, almost parody of pop rock films in a lot of ways. I watched that several years ago, and I was amazed about as to how watchable it was.
Well, when we're done with this, would you please go watch Glitter and see if that holds up?
No. Nice try.
Yikes.
All right. I'm going to wrap it up here. We've hit the well over the hour mark. Eric, thanks for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
For this triangular roundtable. And I want to remind everyone that they can go to digmeoutpodcast.com to suggest an album for a monthly poll. 9 or 8 albums go up every month for us to vote on as a patron, or for you to vote on as a patron. And that's also where you can go to sign up for the box newsletter, which gets delivered every week in your email and at Patreon. New album reviews, our calendar, keeping track of new albums, movies, and books relevant to 80s and 90s music. And of course, if you like what you heard, consider leaving us some positive feedback over at Apple Podcasts. So for Jay, I'm Tim. We're out. We'll be back next week with another episode of Dig Me Out. All right.
Cool. Thanks.
Well, hopefully more people show up for the Thanksgiving episode. Or it's just gonna be me and Jay talking about records for.
Well, that's
We
what we do
liked.
every other year.
All right, that's true. That's true.
So Jay, what's your hat?
It is a designer, Aaron Draplin.
Okay.
He kind of has this like thick line graphic style, and this
Okay.
is just one of the designs he did of these bats. But
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking very like 80s Atari box cover.
yeah, all this stuff is like very, yeah, it has an 80s, 70s, 80s kind of vibe to it.
80s Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That color
right.
color scheme. All right, gents.
All right. Thank you once again for having me. And I will talk to you guys later. Have a good Thanksgiving.
You too.
Good night.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.